everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Kenneth. My pronouns are he and him, and I am the host of this here reading series, Poetry at the Point. I'm really glad to have you here for our July edition. Thank you for making it through the ridiculous heat, swimming to get to the front doors of the Focal Point. Glad you're here to bring you this evening to bring you the poetry of Aubrey Byron and Mikkel Snyder. Thanks for doing your best to stay safe. If you want, the Focal Point usually has masks up front. If you'd like to do that, you're welcome to choose so. Shout out to the members of the St. Louis Poetry Center. If you want to become a member, you can do that on our website. You can see me afterwards. I'll send you the link. We'll make it easy for you. Shout out always to the Missouri Arts Council and the Regional Arts Commission who support this program and other programming that we do. We could not do it otherwise. Shout out to the Focal Point, just a lovely space in a lovely location with a lovely smell. I've never really noticed that before. It's very church pew kind of smell. Events I want to mention, I only have one, but it's a really good one. On August 20th, our Sunday workshop will be led by Elizabeth Hoover, who is a poet over at Webster, who's teaching in their creative writing program. And a fantastic human being to boot, but a fantastic poet as well. So I'm really excited. That is free. Again, more information on the website, just to be in the room with other poets who are interested in making their work better with another established poet. So definitely check that out. Really excited for that. Housekeeping for those of you in the Focal Point. Restrooms are out that door right there and to the left, and then they're on your right. Unfortunately, rest in peace, Casa Maya. You cannot buy anything over there because they do not exist anything over there. So hopefully you brought your flask or your water bottle and can enjoy that otherwise. Mikkel, are we buying your zines? Are you giving them to us? What's going on there?
Tips and donations.
Tips and donations. There are some zines over there on the table. So afterwards, please check that out. One of them is even dated today, so it seems to have been made exclusively.
Not all dated. That's when I printed that.
Okay. Well, I've oversold it already. But definitely please check that out. It's really lovely to have some handcrafted art to be made available to us. So thank you for doing that. If you're watching this on Facebook Live or on YouTube, we're glad to have you. Please keep commenting. Please ask questions. We only have 2 poets tonight, which, truth be told, I kind of enjoy. It leaves a lot of breathing room at the end for questions and answers and conversation. So those of you here live and those of you on the internet, we're glad to have you. Please drop some comments in there, and I will connect with our lovely tech guru, Jessica, this evening to see if we have some questions that arise that you'd like discussed with those folks at the end. We'll have some very informal conversation with them, so keep your eyes on that. Okay, on to the poetry. Enough babbling. Aubrey Byron is a writer and journalist from St. Louis, Missouri. She's written for Slate, Gear Junkie, Streets Blog, and Feast Magazine, and is working on her first collection of poems, many of which are inspired by nature. So please welcome Aubrey to the stage.
Okay. Hello. Thank you for coming. I took a really long sabbatical from writing, and it was hard to find motivation. So I want to thank 2 friends for helping inspire me to get back into swing of things and being regularly available to read and give feedback. I definitely feel more myself when I'm writing. A lot of my poems touch on sometimes violent or unsettling themes. Please feel free to step out. I won't be at all offended. And some are more uplifting than others, and I hope to have a palate cleanser again. So. All right. This first one is about that sort of capitalistic desire that if you could just have one thing, one purchase could turn around your entire life, especially when that thing is so outwardly symbolic of who you are, and that's what this poem is about. The farmhouse. 2 stories of off-white siding turn yellow, 3 bedrooms under a prairie roof, 4 creaky steps up to the red door. The dated wallpaper rippled beneath my fingers, bubbling, rubbing hands over possibility. Dark swains caught in my own hall of dreams, the staircase taking to what other families had. But it was the field waiting to be filled with horses that pinned my hopes against sunset. My mother was in the kitchen nodding again at the man's string of numbers. A field of sunflowers chipping faded brown behind her on the wall. When? Don't worry, soon, she said. As we passed the for sale sign, back to the car, hidden from the view of the road in that long drive. I still believed her when she said it could be ours. Returning to our trailer, a home on stilts, swaying in the Midwest wind. All right, this next one is really about the old cliche of journeys versus destinations and the unpredictability of what small moments might forever stay with you. It's a poem named after a place that I never made it to, but has followed me for over a decade. Inspiration point. The hike to a place where epiphanies float around the air, waiting for an ear to worm in. We drove down the gravel streets under limestone bluffs, towering hundreds of feet above, blocking where the sun would sit, the water cascading around us until the roots of the perfect distant and leafless trees disappeared, encompassed by water. Record flooding as it had been swamped the road to the trailhead. I stepped out to observe the roadblock and my trusty hole-filled Vans, too tight skinny jeans shrieking further the muscles atrophied, the ones I wouldn't feed, beneath oversized Goodwill gingham. But as I turned, just a few feet over, the tiny mangled pile chirped. Only half the feathers needed formed on its twisted wings, its small face half buried in the rock and half reaching. For mom, for help, for a different world, a ground less jagged, gravity less cruel, for the chance to get back up and try again, miles from anything and happen stopped by a storm. Somehow I am left to do nature's dirty work. I beckoned my friend to turn away, ushered her back to the car, our safety box bending down to be certain of doom. Then I stood over the baby without a chance, eyes closed, count of 3. I stomped, praying to no one that the hard, swift sneaker did its job. I'm sorry, I whispered, unsure if I was speaking to the now silent baby bird or me. Okay. This is another one about a place I think all of you will find very familiar. And the reminder that changing your perspective can redefine something. The mighty Mississippi. I've lived almost my entire life tucked into the curves of its bends. Distorting myself into the river folds at 3 separate points, I have made a home of its banks. Fishing in its port, I have cast a shadow over its ripples, drinking to its low tide, lying on the wrong side of the flood wall at its mercy. When I finally saw it so narrow, almost creek-like, infantile at the tip-top of Minnesota, I realized I don't know it like it knows me. There are so many other forks unseen, and I want nothing else but to travel its full course, discover its ancient mysteries from within, just me and my plastic steed, letting it take me. This next one is about complicated people, loving them, being loved by them, and how to mourn them while honoring your own memories. A not always grandfather. He rolled the phrase on his tongue when he called me sweetheart. The root words sticking in his mouth, taking time as the hot breath made its way to wash over the peaks and valleys of the sounds, coated and thick as it finally spilled out. And I know he loved me, but the gurgling made me shudder. Bracing, but never sure what for, hollering maybe, taking the temperature of the beer-baked breath, were just the affection I resented, warm and sweet like plums, left to spoil in the summer air. To be loved by him was to be ever in the path of a storm, always forming but never precise, not knowing when it'd strike. My grandma was the flood wall, taking space between between us and the wave's force, but even she couldn't always hold every flow. This one takes a little bit of a turn. It's more explicit and is a simple tale of regret and male fragility. The worst. The worst of my breakups have been procrastinations. Shoving a head from between my legs, unable to stand moisture from a mouth I was tired of listening to. But I stayed, unwilling to pull that trigger, to shoot him in the heart, or perhaps, more fatally, the ego. All right, a couple more for you. So this next one I'm going to read is going to be the most upsetting of mine, theme-wise. And it's about how tragedies can have a ripple effect. I think that's especially true in small towns where I grew up. And in it, I'm not trying to exaggerate my relevance, but sometimes a big event can really shape a town and their outlook and change people. And even when you don't personally know them. And because it's a very small world and I'm not in that inner circle of pain with this true story, if someone here somehow recognizes the story, I'm very sorry. Car culture. I was driving home when the sideways wind swirled the leaves into funnels. Twisting in front of the car, the air gathered against the door to steal me from the road. Hands sweating on the wheel I was so unused to, pulling left to stay straight, and I swear it's true, when that famous acoustic riff and flute came on the radio, the lady who's sure had me convinced I might really die. As the pollen-filled air curled, pressing harder at my side as if asking for something, barely 16 in a week, still uncomfortable in my atheism, sizing the fit of that title, maybe some deity was laughing at me after all. I saw people running, seeking shelter from another matchbox, the firehouse with tin siding, barely more than a barn. They were an outsized crowd in a one-stop sign town. A party formed and thwarted to look for the missing teen. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed Catholic schoolboy I didn't know. My license had a week to its mint, and I wasn't racing to get back to our trailer, but wanted out of the funnel's alley. Small towns have so many miles between, so many vacant storefronts to greet you in a storm, boarded and paint chipped, looking more like an actor than a before. A friend lived not far, and I ran out into the pelting rain, beat on her door, contesting the wind's force, as if it more yelled than whispered, turning the world sideways, trees, signs, dreams. My burnt straight hair flew in all directions, electrified, until the dark windows and missing car computed, foolish in my optimism. I turn around, faced with green skies from the west. I always thought spring was a time for hope. The drums hit as hail began to drop like bullets from the sky. A call half lost in the wind floated over, not from the piper to join him, but a neighbor motioning me toward perhaps the last vestige of inviting a stranger into your home. The father was waiting for his daughter, part of the search party. News on. He told me about touchdowns here and there as he did his best to will a call from his phone. After the tornado, I went home and laid on my bed made of water, dreaming of a house with foundation, how my new license would be the freedom to get away from this town. 10 days later, they found that boy in the lake, locked in the car like a prison while he drowned. The day after they skimmed the water, head humming with the news, my mother walked outside to put a hammer under my driver's seat. I wish I was doing a palate cleanser next, but this is the last of the heavy. True story, kind of funny story, I guess, about this one is it came about after I went to therapy for the first time as an adult, which I encourage anyone to do. It's great. I just discovered I had adult siblings, and via the father I have never met. And it was during the pandemic, and my normal go-to solution would be to walk down to the bar, get a glass of whiskey, and that wasn't available to me, and I was like, I guess I'll get on BetterHelp. So I signed up for this therapist, and she gave me this assignment to write a letter to this man who gave me an extra chromosome, and I was bitterly calling it my therapy homework, and avoiding it until finally I sat down and wrote 38 pages. Not to send, but just to keep, to have for me. This poem is not 38 pages. It's a very condensed version of what I have to say. To you, who is dead but still living, heartless and beating, did it ever make you think how often I would have to explain your ever-present absence? Did you ever wonder what I say to my loved ones, those who love me, new and old, when they ask with rounded eyes? That you simply are not, by even imagination with the little I know. I can only sketch chin dimples in my mind's eye, cheekbones like mine, holding unkind green eyes. Can you inherit absence? I am tired of being the one to answer questions that can be so silent. Sick as I was as a child, not that that memory stirs you, has you, is kept, not that you know. I could fill books with everything you don't know about me. Well, why should I give you a history? We're here to talk about what you've given me. Is it yours? This undercurrent of melancholy, this penchant for drinking, how I trick my friends with a flash of teeth, how effective my toothy smiles can be. When they leave me alone, where the bug wraps my mind, I'll never know if I caught it from you. And alone my head turns, tells me how little I'm worth, what I don't deserve to call mine, a knife's edge sharpening on a glass of wine, nihilism reaching like a clock hand to shorten my time. But a spare text will pull me from that ledge, remind me of who I'm not, no matter what my DNA is. And now some well-meaner gave me your number, 30 years later, and a rope with a tin can tying me back to you again. I stare at those 9 simple clues, and it is time. It is finally due to repay the thoughtlessness, the bounced checks of caring. You are not worth another moment, another withdrawal from the bank of my happiness when I have been saving, carefully collecting what I needed all those years ago. Because it is you who bankrupt yourself with the cost of all that distance. Each mile a void of debt ringing red, and I won't be there to fill it, ever. That's her. This one is just partly an ode to common birds. The magpie. The magpie hops through the yard, black-beaked, more interested in the woodpile than me. I zoom in on the mountain backdrop, but abandoned metal piles leap into the frame, always discarding what we no longer need, unclaimed, while nature takes each piece. The bird has caught me now, but she doesn't fly. She eyes my cadence, my camera with its path unthreatening. In the finder, she seems to roll her eyes. Maybe humans wouldn't need to seek out beauty, borrowing from the birds, the dogwood trees, red-soaked skies. We weren't always abandoning, piling, demanding, then tossing aside, leaving the wild nowhere to hide. Okay. Just have 2 more for you. This next one is just advice to myself as a child. In the woods, when you run through the woods, book in hand, stop at the blackberry bushes. Steal 2, let the sweet juice pop, bursting in your mouth with a sucking bite. Then walk along the creek bed, let the trickles clear and blue wash over, thinking of where the water travels until you find your favorite oak. No blanket needed, on a soft moss, curl up, open up. The paperback mysteries dance, let the stories spring out, surround you like tall grass. All right, this is my last one. A bit of a reflection in nature. Thanks again for listening, and I wish you inspiration in all your creative endeavors. Controlled burn. I slip into the budding leaves of the emerald honeysuckle that colonizes the woods. One step and out of sight, superpower or my husband's chagrin. We couldn't find you. The dog by his side is voted on it. As the branches open, ash trees clear the way to scorched earth. The barren umber ground, scarred and distant, lost of tone until the May apples rise, perking against the sun, revealing their still green fruits, Small umbrellas strike their familiar open pose over ashen ground. The invaders burnt away to the first takers, opportunists of mild weather. And I wonder which season I could be the Mayapple. What would it take to pop up new? Thank you.
Thank you, Aubrey. As you were standing up here, I was realizing that it's very dark on the stage. I can never find the lights just for these, so
I love to be shrouded in darkness.
it's a little mood lighting that I did absolutely on purpose. So we're gonna go with that. Our second reader for the evening is Mikkel Snyder, a Filipino-American writer based in St. Louis, an instructional technical writer by trade for the last 8 years. Mikkel has been a creative writer for far longer and has dabbled with poetry, fiction, zines, pop culture journalism, and more recently creative nonfiction. They are a co-publisher of Freeze Ray Poetry and writer for Black Nerd Problems. Their poems have been featured in Radius Lit, Decomp, and Button Poetry, which, by the way, is nothing to sneeze at in terms of performative poetry. That's readily available online, so check that out. Mikkel, please.
I was in a cult in college. I'm actually constantly in a cult, constantly in a deep cut of shallow earth, a field that was cultivated, and honestly, wouldn't be surprised if that farmland is now on fire, but you have to admit that the end of the world is a good way to bring people together. You have to admit that the Synders make a mighty fine signal flare, and I have to admit that I'm never not in a cult, never not in a group, never not wanting, never not hoping, never not loyal to those who have shown loyalty. A fine fine of fealty. It's the only payment I have ever known, and I'll gladly pay it time and time again. I was in a cult in college. I was in a cult beforehand, Catholic guilt like oversized rosary beads, Catholic guilt like wondering if my mom would be disappointed that I replaced Sunday Mass with Monday night writing workshops or e-workshops or digi-workshops or a congregation of the folks I hold most dear. However, I scheduled my days around the Reset and Destiny 2, the new episodes of my favorite TV series, specifically My Hero Academia, Haikyuu, and Digimon's Adventure: Note, the colon does not have a follow-up. It's literally just a colon. No, I don't know why either. But in this time of not time, of no days of the week, only yesterday, today, tomorrow, this multiple way, that my day is dedicated not by sunlight, but by the injections of insulin, but the turnip market and Animal Crossing. And I'm currently very angry at a rabbit because there are goddamn eggs where there should be iron, and I can't build a robot hero out of eggs, and I can't build a Pacific Rim homage without a robot hero. And it's not that I hate the rabbit, but I do hate the institutions that have arisen because of him. And it's not that I hate the Catholic Church, it's just that I hate the fact that I once thought all my friends were going to hell because of a loose interpretation of a text tessellated and translated and transformed like consubstantiated was a word people said when they rewrote the book. And I know a thing or two about writing books, about writing, about sampling and samples, the remix, the remake, the retake, the reshake, and I don't think we ever done so much as we'll learn to stop trying to transmute electricity in the glass lines in the sand, petrified lightning and scarred earth, a monument to this mastery of magic, this strange fire we learn to spit and swallow, this conflagration of the highest order. I was in a cult in college. And a cult, of course, there were dungeons, and I'd argue there were dragons, and I'd argue that there were myths made, wordsmiths with gilded tongues used to sickly slice through the air and cut a deep well of ink, or digi-ink, like Digimon, but not. Imagine it's the same, but it's not. There's a colon. That's a callback. It's the inverse of a foreshadow. The contrapositive is, of course, afterlight, the fact that it takes 7 minutes for light to reach us. Call this cult a clan of Icarus, reaching for the sun. Call this cult Dyson, put it in a cage, call it a cult. A playful thing. A nostalgia. A rose-tinted glass wheel learning to recolored in realistic light, see the fire for what it is, just a different sort of light that we reflect, refract, or voices around the bonfire reverb and recall this timing, this position, this angle, perfect. That's an illusion, a misdirect of magic, the consumption, the adoration, the connection. It's always a matter of connection. It's a matter of circles and continuous, a matter of repetition and ritual and ritual and repetition, and we know this. We know this better than anyone else. Woo! How are we doing, folks? My name is Mikkel Snyder. I came up through the slam poetry generation that came up in the 2010s. I went to school at Washington University. We held a weekly writing workshop called Inklings, and that changed my life forever, and I'm a better person because of it. And we're gonna have some fun tonight, right? So, one of my favorite things about slam poetry is the theatrics of it, and one of my favorite parts of that is the persona poem. So this is a persona. He said, flip the switch, the table, the body, this valve on, this valve off, this wheel, turn it, wash hands, body, equipment, instrumentation, sterile, and pointing north the weather like the swelling like a harp, raindrop a rhythmic like the heart's first beat press, warm fingers against cold body press, cold body against cold metal, this fire, stoke it, stole this fire, level straps and a metal buckling, the storm fronts on its way, stolen fire on its way, says, a hunch says to me, hunch back, says the body, burns, says the man, this switch off, this switch on, turn that reel, raise the alarm yesterday. I planted pitchforks near every home in preparation for the body, cold, the body, warm pink pricks while sewing silk like scar tissue like knotted rope. Hang on to this, friend, he says, hang on to this. He has a hunch. It will work. The lightning rising over the horizon, can't be afraid to get a little wet, messy, dirty. This is how we get clean, though. This is proof of concept. Scientific progress, ethical. He promises I'm with him till the end, but the pitchforks will come in later. Grip the switch, let go the body. The shovel's still dirty, you know? The shovel's still dirty, you know? Soiled and soiled, a sullied conscience, a clean conscience. It wasn't theft. A different vein of crime, accent buried, forgotten like the spark of lightning. God's fire here, a heartbeat. In a blink of an eye, in a blink now, two eyes, the level buckles and breaks. Got a hunch back, storm front receding, storm front hanging round here. This body got stolen fire, got stoked, skulls from silk, it's ethical. A thought experiment, greater good, eternal like God, but man-made, this crazy, man-made, crazy, they will say monster, not doctor, monster, misnamed, misattributed, and it said father, like God grew out of silk and scar tissue. I won't let him say he can't do it, will only let him say he tried. Some monsters you help make so you can help unmake them. Some things you build just to watch burn. Some things happen not because you want them to, but because they were going to happen anyway. And I said, I'd be for them until the end. Thank you for snapping. Thank you for any feedback. I love feedback. A couple days ago, this past Saturday, I made the foolish decision to go watch Oppenheimer and then immediately watch the Barbie movie afterwards. It was 6 hours in the Alamo Draft House. It was a great experience. It was a fugue state. Lots of things happening. I bring this up because it's relevant, but I wrote this poem not because of this, but it is relevant, and you find out a little bit. So. The Higgs boson talks shit. 1. To the journalists. Don't call me God. Don't call me that. I ain't God. God ain't got nothing on me. Find your little shepherd in a chapel across the street. Takes a microscope the size of a small country and a hadron collider the size of a large river to even see my shadow fade, decay. Don't compare me to Holy Ghost and use my full name. God damn it. God damn it is what scientists called me first because they couldn't find me at first or second or third, so don't clip my name of the curse. Don't factor out the shouting, you sensationalists. You're leaving out the most interesting parts. You tell me you understand how fundamental I am, a particle destined to shatter, a ray form meant to collapse, like your words have weight without me. Like you have weight without me. Like you can leave the lights in your house on without me. I got no spin, no charge, no color. Don't spin this story, don't charge this story, don't color this story. It is foundational, like the truth, like the ones you undercut and oversell. Like you think I'm anything but the boss, of course. You compare me to your God. You can't seem to understand what they are either, what they want from you either. Like you keep falling in this ether slowly too, to the scientists. You cursed my name like you should. God damn it. Every time I eluded you, bet you didn't think I could be this elusive, illustrious you face. You fathers of particle physics forgetting the mothers like the origin of matter would be masculine instead of maternal. Forget how you wouldn't know radiation if it weren't for Marie, and would know less if it weren't for her daughter. Like she and Shem didn't help design Little Boy and split the atom. How you didn't know the atomic shell if it weren't for Maria. Least wouldn't tell you about fission, you patronizing asses, and you'll never cite Shirley despite her PhD from MIT. Like you didn't have to look these names up. You paint your pantheon of physics as only white men. Think you can Feynman, Newton, or Einstein or Hawking and find me by yourself. Don't come looking for me till you check your own history like you are capable of creation by yourself, free to itself. I am the linchpin, asymmetric and unknown. I bewilder humanity with the mere mention of my name, allure them to a scale they cannot comprehend, and like they are bosons to the stars. I create a universe and sustain it. And in the end, it takes me units of times that humans cannot even begin to fathom to create life imperfect. And they will see the lights of dying stars long before they see the tiniest glimpse of my decay. Okay. I'm gonna pivot wildly now. So no more personas. Maybe one later. We'll see. So, you mad scientist, you practitioner of improvised alchemy, you mercurially minded melting into a malt, brown sugar syrup in a vial adjacent to another vial of brown liquid in a centrifuge, muddied salt and vinegar, a caustic sodium chloride contrasting the saccharine sweet. This is the closest approximation of necromancy you can manage now. This is an imprecise science at best. Mysticism by any other name at best. You carved sigils on both coasts and got stuck in the Midwestern mud. You landlocked child of the oceans, child of Pacific and Atlantic. What was supposed to be a circular map is now a spiral. What was supposed to be a gateway west is now an anchor arch, catenary in how it captures and captivates. Evenly distributed weight, evenly distributed guilt. You are a laboratory. You are not a cathedral. You are measuring the gradient of ions. There is not an iota of doubt that this is fine. Your mother's tongue quivers and squirms on the dining room table. You think, I will bring my mother's tongue back to life with this adobo. The experiment is a failure. You think, I would try to preserve my mother's tongue in a bowl of hollow. The cryotherapy does not hold. You think, I will remember my mother's voice, but the memory in your head muted. An echo of an echo of an echo, facsimile of a facsimile of a facsimile, what an awful simile for the process of forgetting you fraudulent, you fumbling, you who knows more about dead civilizations of the Atlantic than your heritage of the Pacific. What locksteps your hesitation and unlocks your fervor, how matter you that Catholicism took away the magic you never knew, the visage of a haunting horror, the only superstition your mother told you about over a scoop of ube ice cream in an island you're afraid to return to because you don't know anything about your mother's tongue. It is laying there on the the table. Minutes is a long time. Well, good. We got one more poem. I got something in the back that I will need to grab after this, but we're gonna make it through. This is silly. This is fun. Language is supposed to be fun. The flint-lock tongue locks and loads. Spark plug serpentine forked. Lightning bifurcated, jagged edge, not straight adjacent exception. Euclidean geometry, a triangle with 180 degrees, non-Euclidean space, free-point constructors with a limit to 720 degrees, but never quite reaching it. There is a limit, a point on the map. They're all loose lips, a confession in the imaginary plane. I, yes, indeed. There is a ship sinking. There is a ship sailing. Good rule of thumb, don't ship people. Good rule of people, they have thumbs. Oppose, equal, opposite, push, pull, fundamental laws, Newtonian. The apple falls, non-Newtonian. The magnetic field agitates the nanoscopic suspension of ferrous particles and induced transpires. There are snakes, forked tongues at all. There are fangs, poisonous and venomous. Did you know? If it bites you and you die, it is venomous. If you bite it and you die, it is poisonous. Question the contrapositive. If it bites you and it dies, what is it? If you bit it and it dies, what is it? Trick question, toxic, noxious, and acts as a symbol for crossbones. Answers, it is dead, you were poisonous. It is dead, you were venomous. New question. If it bites you and you like it, what is this? If you bite it and it likes it, what is this? Kink. Question. Which one of you is the monster? Trick question, both. Trick questions. Are the spokes flying because of the storm front rising? Answer, maybe. So, I'm going to put this down. I'm going to reach for the book that I should have brought with me in the first place. Ignore me! Ignore me! Don't proceed! This is kind of bad.
Anybody have a
look,
joke?
scenes.
Joke? No jokes?
Got a couple more, right? This was one of the first pieces I submitted to Free Trade Poetry. We're currently on hiatus right now because running digital literary magazines is costly, expensive, and very hard to do at any time. So this is something near and dear to my heart, and this will probably be the end of the set. So I'm going to use flashlights. When mood lighting fails. The 6-year-old me explains classic cinema. I'm not sure if Titanic was 2 hours or 20 hours long, but I think I don't know I like the movie. I sighed at mostly the same parts my dad sighed at, but not the parts my mom sighed at, and I'm not sure why. Dad whispered to me and my little brother we'd watch a real movie later, but we have to watch this one for Mom. Mom patted him on the shoulder and curled into him. I decided to be quiet then and sunk into my seat when the ship started to sink. My little brother was already asleep. I didn't mind too much. Mom lets us have soda after dark when we go to the movies and popcorn too, and I like how the kernels fly out of the machine. It's like when the iceberg hits the ship and the metal flies everywhere. But I'm still not sure why that girl wasn't wearing any clothes, or why Mom or Dad didn't try to cover my eyes even though they covered my little brother's eyes. And I'm definitely not sure why that guy had to die, or why my mom was crying at the end. I usually don't see Mom or Dad cry. I think I know that dying is a sad thing, but they also told me that love was a happy thing. And I wasn't terribly awake, but I'm almost positive they said love a lot in that movie. And don't tell Mom and Dad, but I wasn't paying much attention when I saw the ship. I thought it was nothing compared to Apollo 13, and I think if they can fix a ship crashing in space, you think they'd be able to stop a ship sinking in the water. My dad spends a lot of time on ships, and he says it's because the Titanic was older. And I don't know too much about science, but I thought something about being older was supposed to be a good thing. My mom spends a lot of time in hospitals and says some old things break more easily, but some things grow stronger, and I hope I can grow stronger. I know that fixing things is a good thing, and that both my mom and dad fix things about. My mom fixes people, and my dad fixes ships. And my mom talks about the Titanic, and she says words like broken hearts, and I ask her if she can fix them, and she smiles and says yes. And when my dad talks about Apollo 13, he says words like differential equations and fluid dynamics, and I'm not sure what any of that means still, but my dad says that one day, if I want to, I might learn. Next week, we're going to see Jurassic Park with a new videotape player, and Dad says it's a pain in the word Mom won't have him say to install, but we can watch the movie on our little TV, and I think that's really cool. We don't have to go out to see movies, and that our TV doesn't just play cartoons. And when I see the dinosaurs on the screen and people getting hurt, I ask my mom if she can fix them, and I ask Dad if he could stop the dinosaurs, but there's also a part of me that doesn't want to stop the dinosaurs because they're really cool. And when Mom and Dad realize this, they go to the computer and they use something called the internet and find a place that has real dinosaurs, except they're not real. They're moving models, but still the coolest thing in the world, and they take my picture of all the cool dinosaurs. I'm trying to turn a page, holding the phone. It's very hard. Because the week after that, my dad's away on a ship, and he's going to be gone for a while. But he gives us a gift and says it was one of his favorite movies, and it's called Star Wars. And I'm hoping that there's more space and more dinosaurs. My mom makes breakfast, works in the morning while we're in school, but the weekend is coming up. And I show her my good grades in math and science and reading, and she smiles and says, okay, we'll watch one more. And that's going to be Bassett. He has to fix things from science like my mom does, only different. And I can't wait till I fix things. I'm not sure what I'll fix, but I think if I can learn to fix something, everything will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Woo!
If you want, you can stay here and you can find one of these seats. And I'm going to see if Aubrey could make her way to the stage. And we'll have a little surprise me. Surprise me. That's what we're saying. So this is your chance, crowd, as things have been percolating around in your brain, to ask these people some questions. I have some of my own. And we will have a bit of a conversation.
You too, Internet.
You too, Al Gore's Internet. I would love to hear what you have to say. So, I'm going to start with Aubrey. So, just because you went first. So we talked a little bit about at dinner beforehand, all of us in some way are trying to or have tried to write journalistically in some way. And a lot of your journalism has to do with camping and the outdoors and bike packing, which is a brand new term for me and fantastic. I'm going to check it out. But I'm curious, and some of that showed up in the poetry you read tonight. A lot of it didn't. But I'm curious to know kind of what, for you, if there's anything, and this is a very existential question, what does doing a lot of that in your personal time teach you about writing, or does it, right? Like, where for you is the overlap between the time you've been able to kind of spend outdoors and the time you spend writing? What's the back and forth? What's the dynamic there?
That's a really good question that I don't know that I've thought about. But I think the answer is that I'm someone who's somewhat anxious, and like in our digital notifications, Slack, email world, I need to be able to turn my brain off to write. And so going outdoors, and you were saying bikepacking, I'm like, I hope you do try it. It's sometimes suffering. It's type 2 fun, but I think I enjoy it. I always am not sure if I'm enjoying it when I'm doing it, and then afterwards I'm like, that was really cool.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I just need to be able to turn my brain off to really process. And I think that's why I write a lot of poems at 2 in the morning. I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, so, yeah.
Wow. I'm very too old for that. I want to then kind of take that and then expand it to the both of you. I'm curious about, so back up in a little bit of context, something I've been very interested in talking with poets about on this stage, and then would love to take that into eventually a Poetry Center podcast, which doesn't exist anymore except in my head, and hopefully on paper, and then eventually in the real world, is just poets as citizens, right? Like most people who identify as poets aren't making a living off that part of their identity, right? It's just something we feel called to do or do because it's what we enjoy doing. So I'm curious as to kind of how you see your responsibility, right? I mean, slogging from the restaurant to here was like going through pea soup, right? Because of this heat wave that we're experiencing, partially because of climate change. And so I'm curious for you, not that a poet is obligated to do something that relates to their poetry as a citizen, but how you see yourself as a citizen poet, right? And maybe I'll start on the end over here.
Poetry, like I mentioned earlier, was a very big part of my life in undergrad, and I'm a very different person because of all of the connections I made when I was working with poets within the slam community. And I learned a lot about myself and a lot about the world in general. And I think one of the things that I discovered is that art itself is a worthy endeavor, and it's something worth pursuing for the sake of pursuing it. So the reason why I like doing sets and I like doing poetry, even though it's not the primary thing I do anymore, is because it's something that in and of itself is worth pursuing. It's fun. You have fun doing this. You have fun making other people have fun. Language is this weird toy. When I say apple, you can picture an apple, and that's magic, right? So like a lot of it for me, it comes from the fact that like poetry is this really cool thing, and it's cool when you get to share cool things and be in community over those cool things. And like when I can host workshops, when I can do stuff like that, it's about holding the space more than anything else, because like the world's crazy. It's a very weird place right now, and it's been a weird place since longer than 2020, longer than who knows what. So yeah, I like holding spaces. I like being able to hold space with folks.
That's a good answer. Mine is a little bit different. I'm not sure what you mean by citizen poet completely, but I can say that I'm lucky enough that I work in a somewhat creative field. I was in journalism, and that helped me a lot actually with creative writing, because I used to get so hung up on just like the syntax of this one minute line and make the perfect word. What is the perfect word? And I would never finish anything. And then I wrote for a living, and they were like, "You have a fucking deadline. You need to get this out now." And it helped me so much with getting over that. And now even in content marketing, it's just like, produce some content. Definitely, preferably without errors, but like let's get something out. And that's helped me a ton with writing more, and then also kind of, and the more I've written, the more I've wanted to find community of other people who do the same. And I guess my one thing on the citizen poet is that a thing I started doing like 2 years ago is that when I travel, I go to a local bookshop and I pick up a book of poems by a local poet. And I've discovered some really incredible artists that way. I highly recommend this. There are like, I was in the smallest town in Michigan, and there were like 8 chapbooks by local poets. I'm like, what's happening in this town? In the Upper Peninsula, that's apparently a good place for writing. So anyway, yeah, I just want to like consume other people's stuff. So.
Shout out to the UP for sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate the call to remember that poetry doesn't have to do anything, right? Like that is very important. Yeah, so thank you for that. I think in general, where I'm always trying to get at is, as folks who believe that, I feel a certain obligation to do something with it, right? To spread that gospel, if I can overuse a religious metaphor. So yeah, no, I appreciate y'all's calls. So as is part of my job as a host. I stalk these people online a little bit when I find out that they're reading and see what they're putting out into the internet. So as a DC Comics kid growing up, it was really awesome to see the impressive levels of nerdiness that you're putting out, especially primarily on your Twitter feed. We're not going to talk about X.com tonight. But yeah, I was curious to, and so it's every now and again I talk to my 5-year-old son about kind of nerdiness, and every now and again he asks me what a nerd is or what it means, and I never really know what to say because it means something so different now than when I was his age or even like 20 years ago. So maybe I'll just not, guide the witness at all and just ask you, what does it mean to be a nerd? What is the essence of nerdiness now for you, Black nerd?
I'm not Black. I write for a website. I have to disclaim this because one time I was interviewing some folks who were contestants on MasterChefs, and because of Black nerd problems, one of our founders is a dude named Omo Holman. So I get on this interview with the chef, and the first thing he asks me is like, "Are you Omar?" And sort of like, no, I'm not. And like, I do not sound like this person at all, and it's just, we're going to get past that. Fun fact, back in middle school, the middle schools in Maryland have like this world history day where like you spend like a month working on like this project, right? And one of the things that I did, because I was a weirdo, was that I constructed a whole sociology project so I could examine the difference between geekdom and nerddom, because that was a thing. I'm not sure that's still a thing. So to answer your question, because that is the point of all of this, I don't think the definition of a nerd has actually changed over time. I think it very much goes to the fact that like it's just a person really passionate about a really specific thing in a really specific way. And I think the conception of a nerd has changed because pop culture has changed and has become something that is more integrated with us as opposed to it being siloed. Because 10 years ago, you would watch something because you would download it off of a very legitimate site. I promise you, it was completely legal. No comment. And then it would be on a flash drive that you have. And now it's everywhere. It's on movie theaters, it's on every single streaming service, and they get into weird bidding wars about streaming service. So nerdity, I think, has not fundamentally changed, and I think we've also learned to apply it to other things, because like there were sports nerds. There were nerds for everything, and there were geeks for everything, and it's not a bad word. It's just you like this thing, and you like it a lot. That it can sometimes like make it hard to have conversations, but it's not because you are bad. It's because like you just really like this thing.
That's fair. Maybe I'm trying to say like there was punishment for nerd when I was 7, whereas I feel like saying you're a nerd now resonates differently into the culture, right? I just feel like maybe it's received differently. That's kind of where I was going with that.
But that's a whole other can of worms.
Well, pivoting a little bit, but kind of sticking with this idea of like pop culture, right? Like, and this is something we also talked about kind of a little bit at dinner. I'm curious as folks who are trying to, because I feel like in a lot of ways, poetry is an attempt to write something that will last, right? Even if there are references to things that may be missed. But I want to stay in the things that will be missed, right? There are references like in some of your poems and places that are very local, right? That we would get that may not be gotten elsewhere. I'm curious as to your thinking when you're including these things that may be missed, whether they be pop culture references, whether they be local St. Louis references. Why are you including those in there when you're trying to think about something that will last? Does that make sense as a question? I remember having lots of arguments as an undergrad about like people bringing poems into workshops and it just being filled with things that we all understood together, but would somebody what's the the cliche? Is it going to play in Iowa City or right? So help me out here.
Well, the first part of the answer is that I can't help it. I just write about what I write about. But the second part is, I think that a generic poem that tried to like have something for everyone would be one of the most boring pieces of writing that anyone's ever written. So I'm not interested in that in particular. And I think that the idea is that maybe you don't know what my town is that I grew up in, but like maybe you also had something like that in your town and that you find some sort of commonality. Or, and maybe you don't, and maybe my poem's not for you, and that's fine too.
One of my poetry teachers mentioned very early on that specificity is what makes the poem yours and what makes it accessible to other people. When you try to appeal to everyone, you lose all personality to it, and it fades into just being sort of like a vague notion of a thing. But when you can list details, when you can ascribe specific instances, that resonates more with people. And to pivot to rhetoric devices that are derived from Greek words, one of those that gets left out of the core trio is this concept of kairos, right? Timeliness. And when I include pop culture pieces, it's because I want to place it in a time. I want to place it so like, this is where my head was at. I want you to be able to be sort of like, oh, what is this? And be able to look it up. Now, whether or not you're going to be able to look this up in a dozen years because of server stabilities, who knows? But right now you can look at a thing and like find more information about it, and then also learn something in its stead. So like the specific references, they ground the piece, and like there are pieces of work that have survived much longer than I think anyone would have expected them to. I don't think Shakespeare expected any of his stuff to last God knows how long and continue to be used, right? So yeah, specificity is probably like the best thing you can do when writing, is to just find something only you could do in a way that only you could do it.
Yeah, I appreciate both your thoughts. I saw a clip from an interview with Seth Rogen in the last couple days, and he was talking about how his first couple of Superbad and those movies, he found that the more specific he made those stories to his experience and the experiences of the people very close around him, the more universal they seemed to be. Like the more narrow he made the story, the more particular he made those characters' actions and thoughts and behaviors, the broader the nest it tended to cast. I found that very, very fascinating. Okay, well, we are reaching the end. So I'm going to ask you to do something that I ask all of my guests to, and I'm realizing in this precise moment that I did not prime you for this, so good luck to the both of you. But Al Philreese, who works at Penn at the Writers' House, has this practice on his podcast of asking his guests to gather paradise. So we're going to think about the things that we have recently found or recently rediscovered, hopefully particularly in the world of the literary arts, that we're really digging right now. If it's not about books or poetry or literary, that's okay too. What's the dopest, most artiest thing that you found recently that's really floating your boat? I'll start, so that's going to give you some time to kind of think about it. I was talking, before you all showed up, we were talking, the three of us, about I cannot stop obsessing about podcasts, shows, documentaries that are about the creative process. And I was recently listening to an episode of Broken Record, which is a fantastic podcast I highly recommend. It was an interview with Feist, who is a Canadian singer-songwriter, pop musician, about the creative process. Highly recommend that episode. But she, in that episode, was referencing an episode of On Being, which is another fantastic series that you should definitely check out. And it's an interview between Krista Tippett and Rick Rubin, the legendary producer who's kind of become a bit of a guru in his own right, just about the creative process and kind of how he works with folks, which, spoiler alert, involves a lot of closing his eyes and kind of swaying his body and feeling his way through it, which I really am fascinated by. So, Broken Record podcast, strongly recommend, and On Being for sure. So, what do you like in terms of the art world these days?
I am currently engrossed in Our Lives Under the Sea by Julia Arnold. I'd have to look. And it is kind of timely after the Titanic submersible was just everywhere. It's about sort of this submarine that I don't actually know what happens yet, so it's great. I won't spoil it. But it's just this like slow moving train wreck, just the slowest build towards something obviously unseemly, and it's great for me because I love creepy, but I don't always love horror. I mean, sometimes, but right now it's just like that, like sort of hair raising. It's the perfect amount. So I don't know where it's going though. So if it becomes full blown horror, I'm sorry.
I like media that blends formats in really weird ways and uses the constraints of the format to do something interesting with it. So I looked this up because I can't remember names with anything, but there's a book called This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mortar and Max Gladstone, and it's a epistolatory, which is a series of letters, and it's between two time travelers who are opposing ends of this grand temporal conspiracy. And it's about them falling in love while also being on the opposite sides of the war. And it's one of the weirdest stories, it's one of the sweetest stories, and it's one of like, it just does really cool things with language and the form in a way that like, it makes me excited to make things, which is really the highest praise you can give a piece of work, is that sort of like, oh, I need to do something now. I can't not do something. This exists and I'm almost angry about it because I didn't do it. So it's a really good book. I recommend it a lot.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks very much for those. Can we begin closing by appreciating these poets, please? Thanks very much. Our next reading is going to be on August 22nd. Our readers are going to be Gloria Day and Leslie Day. Absolutely no relation, which is pretty funny. Just a reminder, if you are on the internet in the future, we still like you. We're glad you're checking out this here reading. Please still comment, please still share. We want to grow momentum for this reading series and also for the work of these poets. If you're here in the focal point, please go to the corner and check out some awesome zines and give some tips and donations. Thanks again to the poets. Glad you were here. Thanks to Jessica for stepping in and making all the technology work, because I have no idea how that works. Thanks to Aaron Quick, who couldn't be with us this evening, but who absolutely is the bronze behind this program and makes sure that everything flows smoothly. Thanks to all of you who showed up in person for a poetry reading in the year 2023, which is a pretty awesome thing. Be safe, take care of each other. See you soon.